At the Missouri Chamber, our employees take advantage of the central bank HSA service and enjoy the benefits of having that savings account for their medical needs. I'd encourage all of you to take advantage of our HSA, which truly enhances what you can offer to your employees. To tell you more about this service, it's my pleasure now to invite Deborah Lake from Central Bank to the Zoom. As you have any questions for myself or Deborah, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A box, and we will get those answered or taken care of as we proceed. But now, Deborah, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you so much for your participation, your partnership. We've got a great relationship with Central Bank, and they've been nothing but fantastic friends and partners to create this product. Deborah?
Great. Thank you so much, Dan, for that introduction. I appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today and to allow us to talk with you about health savings accounts and what this benefit is that you have as a part of that integrated solution with the HSA Central product that you have through Missouri Chamber and those plan benefits. So as Dan mentioned, I'm Deborah Lake with the HSA Central Division at Central Bank, and I am excited and happy to be here to talk to you about health savings accounts and this solution that you have with that. So as Dan mentioned, we do have a partnership with Missouri Chamber that came out of some needs that were identified within the Missouri Chamber of wanting to expand and offer additional features and functionality. As Dan mentioned, with the growth of those MIWA plans and the offerings that the Chamber has been able to offer you and these employers and brokers and all of the people that go together in offering this, the health savings account was a piece that was identified as an opportunity to integrate better and new features for your employees. So in last May, actually, we did expand that partnership to offer that high deductible health plan health savings account as a part of the integrated plan benefits. So throughout this last year, employers on the Missouri Chamber plans for those HSA eligible plans have been able to offer their employees access to this tax advantage account at no additional cost. So we're going to go back to the basics here a little bit. In the benefits world, as you guys are well aware, we kind of get into the ABC soup of benefits of FSAs and HSAs and 401ks and all of that jumble. So taking it back to the basics here, what is a health savings account, an HSA? At its very core, it's a tax advantage savings account designed specifically for qualified medical expenses. And throughout today's conversation, we'll talk about what those qualified medical expenses are, but we're going to step back into that tax advantage piece. Tax advantage makes me think of IRS, so we're moving into the IRS contribution limits. You can see those both for 2022 and 2023 of what those limits are. These limits are tied to your plan coverage level. So if it's individual coverage that your employee has, it's just them, no one else, you can see what those contribution limits are. Then for family coverage, them and one other family member at least is considered family coverage. So those are the limits that we are allowed to contribute on an annual basis as a part of those IRS limits. A couple things to mention here as we're talking about health savings accounts, they are individual accounts. So even though they may have family coverage, maybe it's your employee and their spouse who have that family coverage, that account is owned by your employee. So it's not a joint account, although we'll talk later about how that spouse and family members can utilize those funds that are put in. A couple other things to keep in mind is that those funds roll over from year to year, regardless of job or insurance change, those coverage changes, the funds belong to your employee. And then lastly, in addition to the contribution limits that you see here, there's also a catch-up contribution that is allowing for $1,000 per year for those who are age 55 and over, so giving them that catch-up option. And I'd like to mention that contributions can continue to be made up until the tax filing deadline, which in most normal years, obviously, is that April 15th timeframe. So in the case of our 2022 taxes that we're filing by April 15th of 2023, we can contribute up until that date for 2022. Just wanting to put those things in there. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment. As the reminder for the Q&A today, please feel free to ask questions as you have them, and we'll pause throughout this today to address any of those questions that you do have. And of course, Dan, feel free to stop me as you see questions come up that are relevant to where we are at that point in time, and we'll address the rest at the end. So what are the eligibility requirements for a health savings account? You have to be covered by a qualified plan. So this is an HSA eligible plan. For the MEWA, you can see the 4 plans that are listed out there as those HSA plans. And so those particular plans and being enrolled in those plans cause that HSA to open and have access to the benefits of that tax advantage account. There are a few other eligibility requirements, one being that no other health coverage outside of that MEWA coverage that you would have there for the HSA plan. That does allow, though, some other permitted insurance exceptions, maybe like accident insurance or long-term care insurance, vision, dental, specific disease plan, or hospital plan. In order to be eligible to have the HSA and contribute, you also can't be enrolled in Medicare, and you can't be claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return. With that, Dan, I'm just going to pause and see if we have any questions to address before we look at some of the differences between a health savings account and a flexible spending account.
All right, Deborah, thanks for the intro. And we do have a couple questions. One, can a small business use Central Bank without using or enrolling in the MEWA health plan?
Right. So while, of course, we really appreciate the benefits that come with the MEWA plan, we do also offer, separate from the Missouri Chamber, the health savings account option. So perhaps you have a plan through someone else that you're looking to have that health savings account to support your employees. Absolutely, we can assist with that. We have the ability to set you up as a separate employer group and allow your employees to take advantage of those benefits. That could look a little bit different, of course, based on when we're talking about like the employee pricing. With the advantage of having the Missouri Chamber plan is that cost is all a part of the Chamber offering. So of course, that would be a separate conversation, not to get into the weeds there too much, Dan.
Okay, and also we've got a question about the process of we're still doing automatically enrolling new group members in the Central Bank HSA and mailing out debit cards. And Deborah, if you're going to get into that during the presentation, just address that accordingly, but unless you'd like to touch on it now.
Sure. Yeah, Dan, I'd like to kind of kick the can down the road there for a moment. I do have
That's fine.
some of that integration that we'll talk about later in the slides, if that's okay.
Okay. Why don't you proceed? There's another question that came in, but let's have you dig into the meat of this thing a little more, and then we'll
Perfect.
go back to the Q&A.
Thank you. So health savings accounts and flexible spending accounts, a lot of times those things are confused, or what are the differences? Why would I go with one versus the other? What does all of this look like? So that HSA eligible plan allows for that health savings account. So I'm not going to go through all of the comparison of that HSA versus FSA. But just covering a few of the highlights. The contribution limits, which you can see listed here, are for 2022, are one of the main things that are a bit different. Also thinking about what this looks like from year to year. The FSA requires that those funds be used in the same year or shortly thereafter, outside of a small amount that can be carried over into the next tax year. As we discussed before, health savings accounts, those funds are owned by that individual. They carry over from year to year, and those employees have access to those funds regardless of whether or not they're even covered by a qualified plan in the future. The other item that I wanted to particularly mention, which is where that tax advantage really comes into play, is the investment capability. The FSA is set aside as funds on a pre-tax basis, and they just sit there until you use them. However, for the health savings account, we'll talk a little bit more about that triple tax advantage. The investment capability is where the health savings account can really run the full gamut of being even a part of your retirement plans and solutions moving forward into the future. So again, health savings account versus flexible spending accounts. HSA individuals, you don't have to spend the contributions versus that FSA. They belong to the individual, accumulating from year to year. You don't have to submit claims for reimbursement to get funds out of your HSA. The HSA earns interest and it can be invested. So how do you contribute to a health savings account? There are a few different ways that can take place. So as a part of the Missouri Chamber Plan and the employers that are a part of that, they get access to the HSA Central Employer Portal, which is a fantastic resource to assist and interact with your employee HSAs and get all-inclusive reporting, schedule contributions, whether that's a payroll deduction or an employer contribution. Perhaps you as an employer have been so generous as to offer your employees in those HSA plans to also have an employer contribution. Kudos to you. It's a great benefit. So the payroll deduction specifically is that automatic withdrawal. So maybe your employee wants to set aside an additional $50 each paycheck to go into their health savings account. That provides them an immediate tax benefit. It's lowering their wage amount before FICA and other taxes are figured as a part of that. So coming out in the beginning. There's also individual contributions. So maybe outside of payroll, maybe someone has a dental procedure coming up and it's going to be before payday, and they need to contribute an extra $1,000 to their HSA. Through the HSA Central Consumer Portal or mobile app, they can add that $1,000 from the bank account of their choosing. And at that point, they would get the tax time benefit on those funds that are put in outside of payroll deductions. So they're still getting that tax benefit, but this is a question we get quite a bit of, how do I get these tax benefits with the health savings account? How am I making sure that I'm optimizing that account and using it in that capacity? So that's where that tax time benefit comes in. We'll talk a little bit later about the tax documents that are a part of health savings accounts and how to use those, which for us, a lot of times we're answering questions about using the W-2 figures of contributions versus the tax documents. That's one of the reasons why it's really important to use the tax documents that produce as a part of the health savings account. Lastly, on the contribution side for health savings accounts is that the IRS does allow a one-time rollover of up to the contribution limit that you can use from an IRA to your health savings account. It's a great benefit to, again, take full advantage of that triple tax advantage. We discussed a little bit about investments, and so HSA funds can be invested to grow for the future while also being accessible for current expenses. That's different than pretty much every other potential retirement account you're looking at, of course, without penalties, right? So those HSA funds, once they've met that $3,000 threshold, they can then invest in a number of different mutual fund options, target date funds, and other options we have within the consumer portal or mobile app. Or if you have an employee who maybe they do have a higher amount in their HSA and they'd really like some investment advice, we do also work with central investment advisors to give them the option to work with an investment advisor to help create kind of that integrated solution of how this fits together in their overall retirement plans. So a nice option to add there, that both they can have the self-directed or the option of the investment advisor. Dan, did we have any questions around investments?
Deborah, none about investments, but there's one that let me try to phrase it right. Since some people who enroll in a high deductible plan may not be eligible to open an HSA, being on Medicare or TRICARE or something like that, can Central Bank work with the employers to make sure these employees are eligible rather than automatically opening up an account for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. So that would really be the exception to the norm. The eligibility piece is just simply that they're not eligible to contribute. So if they're not eligible to contribute and then you wouldn't want to obviously put in any new funds as the employer. If there are some of those that we need to assist in coding or something like that, we can definitely assist with those things. But there's not necessarily a way to know that we would know that someone is or isn't eligible on some of these circumstances that are really at more of an individual family level.
Okay, and one more while we're at it.
Sure.
Does the bank have any plans to do some sort of demonstration what the employer is faced with in setting up the plan, as well as the administrative process and the employee experience, for them to have how they can access and use their funds? And Mike, I hope I got your question right, but Deborah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Dan, let me first mention that we do offer monthly Missouri Chamber employer webinars. We do have that registration that's available at hsacentral.net/Mo Chamber. And we do those on a monthly basis, talking through what that integration looks like, what you as an employer would experience, what your employees have access to, and what that looks like. So if you haven't attended one of those, we definitely suggest that you do. We send out invites to any new employer groups of the Missouri Chamber who have joined in the last 90 days. So that they have access to that. And then we do from time to time send something more inclusive of anyone who happens to be an employer on the plan for just kind of overall general updates. This is what's happening in the HSA space. So if you've attended one of those webinars and it wasn't covering some of the things that you kind of expected as that introduction to the Missouri Chamber HSA plan, please let us know. We can definitely make adjustments to that to better fit the needs of the employers and employees. And of course, we invite the brokers to join those as well, as we do that on a monthly basis.
Okay, no more questions currently, so please feel free to proceed, Deborah.
All right. Thank you, Dan. So that triple tax advantage, what does that actually mean? The main thing here of this 1, 2, 3 is that the money going in isn't taxed. The growth on that money isn't taxed. And as long as they're being used for eligible medical expenses, those funds are not taxed at that time either. So again, the call out here is that those funds in your HSA can be used even if you're no longer covered by an eligible plan. Triple tax advantage is a really big deal. And so as we look through those benefits, you can kind of see on this table here how health savings accounts are stacking up from a tax perspective compared to maybe some other retirement vehicles, the traditional IRA, Roth, 401k. This is the only one health savings account that doesn't have a taxed box. That's really where you can see in the comparison of the other retirement options that there's nothing that's taxed there. The money going in isn't taxed. The growth isn't taxed, which is especially important on the investment side. And then that money going out, of course, with the exception of it being used for qualified medical expenses, it also is not taxed. I didn't put it in these particular slides, but there's an annual study that's done through Fidelity that looks at an average couple who is retiring in this given year or this past year, what they're expected to need to use for eligible for medical expenses throughout their retirement. And that number continues to grow for obvious reasons, but $300,000 is what you're looking at there. So this triple tax advantage is really that much more important, knowing that it's really a health savings emergency fund as we're moving through both expenses today and into retirement. So let's look a little bit further into that triple tax benefit specifically for health savings accounts. So what you're seeing here in this distribution time frame, you've got that 65 years old mark. And so throughout distributions that are for qualified medical expenses before and after 65, no tax, and it's penalty free. What you're seeing before 65, if you're using this for non-medical expenses, before 65, you would pay the tax and the 20% penalty. After 65, it's tax only. So thinking back to, I'm going to flip back to this last screen, that tax only if you're taking the money out, really falls back into the same kind of time frame as that traditional IRA or the 401k. You're taxed at the point that you're taking the money out. So that triple tax advantage going through its full optimization is that you're using it for qualified medical expenses. An illustration to look at that. I mean, triple tax advantage is great, but I'm a numbers person. Let's look at those raw numbers. So we're going to give Jane as an example here. Jane's married. She's got 2 kids. She's thinking about retirement, and she's participating in the HSA, 401k, and Roth IRA. Again, this is for illustration purposes. She's contributing $4,000 into each of those accounts equally. And at the time frame here that we're looking, which is going from year 1 to year 20, we can see what those funds have done in that process. So her HSA, the blue line, based on the fact that she's in a 25% tax bracket, and is distributing at 15% rate, you can see what those numbers look like. So this is what that triple tax advantage does over time, based on the savings, the contributions not being subject to FICA and all those other things. So I like that representation of how you can use this as a comparison. As we're seeing more and more retirement professionals who are suggesting if someone is eligible to contribute to that health savings account, that's done even first in their retirement plans before funding their Roths or 401ks. So an interesting shift as we've seen HSAs become a little more mature in the market. I mean, health savings accounts have been around since 2005, but they're still relatively new, and people looking to optimize what those benefits actually are. Eligible medical expenses. To this point, we've talked a lot about those tax advantages and contributions, but what can we use health savings account funds for? What's allowed? What's a qualified medical expense? And so HSA eligible expenses include medical, vision, dental, and other covered expenses, with the addition of, through the CARES Act in 2020, over-the-counter drugs and medicines, over-the-counter healthcare items. And so the flyer that you see on the right-hand side is just kind of highlighting some of those expenses that are a part of that. So we've got some additional tools that are a part of the HSA Central solution to assist employees in identifying what those are, in addition to, the flyers and other materials that are available. So who can use the funds? Who can use funds from that health savings account? Well, of course, the person who owns the account, that individual that has that HSA plan, the spouse of that account owner, and the dependents of that account owner. So a few things to keep in mind here, which kind of goes back, Dan, to that initial question about, is there something that can be done to make sure that people that aren't eligible to contribute are handled differently? There are other additional factors that play into that. For instance, funds can be used to cover eligible medical expenses of that spouse and dependents, regardless of if they're covered by the high deductible health plan. However, the second bullet point here is if that spouse has a traditional health plan, he or she cannot be enrolled in that flexible spending account if they have the HSA. So other factors to kind of think about here when it comes to who can use the funds. And of course, some of the IRS requirements there and guidance make that a little bit gray in knowing exactly who would be eligible and what that looks like from just even a coverage level outside of some other factors within their home to consider. The HSA Central solution allows, which is similarly to maybe some other health savings account options that are available, allow for use to access, those HSA funds through a debit card. So we have the HSA Central Debit MasterCard that is part of that health savings account solution. In addition to that, we have an intuitive consumer portal and mobile app for the health savings account that allows you to maybe reimburse yourself for medical expenses. Perhaps you went to the chiropractor and you left your HSA card at home. So you paid for that chiropractor copay through your debit card. You can reimburse yourself for that eligible medical expense through that consumer portal or mobile app. You could also schedule a bill pay. So perhaps you've gone to the doctor and you're receiving a bill in the mail for the lab work that was done. You can schedule that bill pay online within the consumer portal, use the debit card to pay the provider directly online, so on and so forth. And so this last piece that I wanted to cover here, which is helpful in knowing what you can distribute funds toward, is that eligible expense scanner. So within the HSA Central mobile app, you can see that scan item for eligibility. And so let's just give the example. We're in Target and I'm a mom of 3 boys, 2 of which happen to be redheaded. So we go through a lot of sunscreen coming through the end of this time of year. So I could be standing in the aisle at Target and, oh yeah, well, maybe I don't want to use my regular household budget for this or that. I wonder if sunscreen is an eligible item. And so I can pick up that item and my phone to access the HSA Central mobile app. It's doing my face authentication there. I'm logged in, select scan item for eligibility, and the camera pops up there with a box that you can then put the barcode into that, and it scans it. And then you can see this item is eligible. I can buy my redheaded boys some sunscreen to make sure they are protected and taking care of their skin health there in confirmation of that eligible expense scanner. So I can be confident as a consumer that I'm using these HSA funds as they're intended. Dan, before we move into some of the tax documents and information there, just wanted to touch base to see if we had any questions that we should appropriately address at this point.
Deborah, I have learned something already this morning, that I can get sunscreen on my HSA card. That is a very good tip. We do have a couple questions. I'm going to ask you in a second. Can you please repeat the website link? We need that repeated. But also another question came in. How soon after a group enrolls with the chamber will employers and employees receive HSA account information? And then if an employer already uses another HSA bank and they do not want these accounts with Central Bank, is there something they can mark with Anthem to not send this to Central Bank to open accounts? That might be more of an Anthem question on the second part, but
Okay.
if you take those two, if you can.
Yeah. So first of all, that website to register for the monthly webinars is hsacentral.net/MO chamber. And that will get you to both the registration for any upcoming webinars, as well as a number of other HSA related Missouri Chamber resources. It has the insert that is in the card that employees get, so on and so forth. Dan, the integration and the timing of what's coming over from Anthem for those HSA cards, I've got a chart here in a couple slides that I want to go through and see if that addresses the questions, and then circle back for any further questions that might come as a part of that, if that's okay.
That sounds fine. I got a couple more while we're at it.
Okay.
Is the account a fixed rate or variable? Do you have a choice, and what is the current rate?
For the general interest rate on the HSA for those funds that are not being invested, at this time, this is a fixed rate. As many of you are aware, we are in a rates changing environment. So those things do change as a result of that based on what we're getting as feedback. So while it is fixed right now, prior to April of 20, if I'm remembering my timeframes here correctly, that was in a tiered interest rate of about 5 or 6 different tiers that were increasing rates based on increasing balances. So I would expect that while we have that same rate across all tiers at this point, there may be a change in that, offering higher interest rates here in the near future timeframe.
And I'll mention to our attendees today, we are going to try to make this available on our website, this presentation and the Q&A on our website for you to take a look at. Stay tuned for that. And there was a reminder sent in, Deborah, you may want to comment on this. A long-term benefit of the HSA is that the funds can be used for Medicare Part B and D premiums, as well as long-term care expenses. Just as an FYI, this is a significant retirement savings point. Any comments on that?
That's spot on. Kudos to whomever sent that in. That is
Mike is on target today.
Yes. Thank you for that.
So it is, you can use your HSA for long-term Medicare Part B and D premiums, and as well as long-term care expenses.
Right. There are some of those Medicare items, those premiums specifically, that are allowed. That is in the if you're looking for some bedtime reading, needing to go to sleep, the IRS documentation has all of that stuff in there, as well as the stipulations in that long-term care piece of what kind of amounts are eligible to be covered as a part of that. Absolutely.
All right. That's all
Okay.
for questions right now.
Perfect. Well, tax documents and the IRS reporting, there are two tax forms that are related to health savings accounts. These are forms that produce on an annual basis. For the HSA Central product, it is usually around January 13th to 15th that both of these documents become available. The 5498 SA reports the dollar amount of contributions that were put into the HSA for the tax year, whereas the 1099 SA reports distributions. As we talked about earlier, remembering that those previous year contributions can be made up until tax filing deadlines. And it's important to use these tax forms alongside the W-2 when filing taxes, because that's going to give that full picture of anything that was put into the HSA outside of the employer that is really important. When filing taxes, it's this form 8889 that you can see there on the right that's completed with the form 1040 that's reporting the contribution and distribution activity in health savings accounts. So I know for myself, I use a tax professional for my taxes each year. And one of the questions that she always asks from those is this the amount that you used for qualified medical expenses throughout the tax year? She's using that to fill in the information on this 8889 form. So the advantages of a health savings account, we've talked a lot about what those are, the triple tax benefit being one of the largest ones, of the growth of investments funds being tax-free and deducted for contributions as a part of your taxes, withdrawals for qualified medical expenses. So we've talked a lot about the triple tax advantage. From a flexibility perspective, you have the freedom to spend these funds as you see fit. You also have the ability to increase or decrease your contributions at any time. So let's face it, I mean, we would all love to be in the situation where we could max out our HSA every single year and take full advantage of that. But as a mom of 3 boys, we have broken collarbones, we play football, we have sickness and everything else that occasionally those budgets of other things need to be adjusted. So having the ability to increase and decrease those contributions at any time based on whatever life situation we have is really a great piece of that flexibility. And you don't have to turn in receipts. I'm not a paper follower of all those things in my personal life as great as maybe I am on the work front. So keeping track of receipts to have to turn in for reimbursement is definitely something that I'm glad we don't have to do for health savings accounts. The increased savings, which ties to that triple tax advantage, again, is the reminder that those carry over from year to year. You can save each month for the expenses as you have them now or expect to have them in the future, and the funds belong to you. So some things that you might discuss with your insurance broker as a small business, if you're not offering that HSA plan yet, what are some things that you might consider? What are conversations you might want to have with your broker? Some of those things might be around the premium savings. Is it a premium savings that would entice you to offer this benefit to your employees and also look at what that savings could be for your business? What about as an employer, if you're thinking about HSAs, but maybe maybe the hang up has been that out-of-pocket cost that's maybe a little bit higher. Maybe you look at, as an employer, offering an employer contribution to help employees offset that out-of-pocket expense. That you could, of course, analyze based on your premium savings as an employer for that, perhaps. And then what education might be needed to help employees understand health savings accounts. I feel like every time we go through one of these educational type webinars, somebody's like, oh, aha, that I didn't realize. I've had a health savings account for 5 or 10 years, and I never realized that was a benefit that was a part of that. So, sometimes our life situations change over time, and things that were important to us at one point aren't as important now. And then we have new things that are important now that weren't then. So always looking at what that education might be for health savings accounts, because again, as I mentioned, they're still relatively new for people as they're looking at those employee benefits. So if you're currently offering one of those HSA plans, how much are you paying for health savings accounts today? If you're on the chamber plan, it's nothing. If it's not a chamber plan that you have, maybe are you paying for anything for today, or are you getting all the options that would allow your employees to best take advantage of that triple tax advantage, investments, and so on? Does your HSA provider provide education and a local contact? We kind of talked about that a little bit. Another thing to ask is, are those HSA funds FDIC insured? That can be important for employees as they're looking about safeguarding those funds. The investment options, we've talked about what those investments look like today. And of course, that's a huge benefit to employees who are looking at really optimizing that account. So does your HSA provide investment options? And then lastly, are those HSA funds located locally within Missouri? Some things to think about and discuss with your insurance broker. How those HSAs can benefit you. They're that affordable healthcare option resulting in savings for your business. And employees who choose one of these consumer-driven healthcare plans and use that HSA, they're typically more cost conscious and tend to have lower healthcare expenses than other employees. They're using those funds in a way to best optimize their health situation. Just a couple of the things to mention there. As an employer, there are a number of other powerful tax benefits that come through that. Employees that are making pre-tax payroll contributions to their HSAs, that lowers your payroll tax liability. And then you're benefiting from lower payroll taxes if they're contributing to employees' HSAs, because your employer HSA contributions aren't included in the employee's income and then aren't subject to that those FICA taxes that are a part of that. On the employer side as well, those employer HSA contributions are also tax deductible as a business expense. So while I'm covering some of these benefits that are obviously tax related, talk to your tax professional about what all that would mean to you and your business. So I'm not quoting tax things that are a part of that. But looking at the FICA tax savings for employers alone, that could be substantial, depending on a number of different factors within that. So again, talk to your tax professional if you want to truly understand all of those tax benefits. So we're getting into some of the additional pieces specifically around the Missouri Chamber HSA plan. So if you'd like to learn more, included in the slides that we'll get that to Dan and team, the Missouri Chamber HSA Employer Handout has a lot of the details here of what employers and employees can expect as a part of this integrated solution. This is also where you can find that web address to go to the Missouri Chamber resources. And then of course, feel free to reach out to us with questions that you might have. That's our inbox here to address questions for you. So jumping into the partnership itself, we've talked through a couple of the questions that have been presented to Dan about the automatic enrollment for employees and employers who choose that plan. The employees receive no monthly maintenance fee on that HSA. They get the free debit card and free bill pay. On the employer side, you get the HSA Central Employer Portal, which gives you information to answer employee questions, know when their debit card was sent, make contributions, and view all-inclusive reports if you were utilizing that, that portal for contributions and so on. So this is where I had kicked the can down the road a little bit from the timing and what that looks like for that integration. So as an employer, you're offering the MIWA plan, the MIWA HSA plan, one of those four that we discussed earlier today. And in offering that, Anthem in the setup documents sets up your employer group. In that employer group, that gets you set up to then get confirmation. It tells you where you can go to access your employer portal, get you credentials to do so, all of those things. So then you have your new employees who are a part of that, whether that's through open enrollment or you have new employees that are joining you throughout the year. As you have an employee who enrolls in that plan, the enrollment is sent to HSA Central. As that taking place, of course, it's based on when Anthem is sending us the information over. We have a frequently asked questions Missouri Chamber HSA Central document that outlines that and quotes a 2-week turnaround on the setup of those things. So some of that is going to be based on with working with the broker, when and how they're submitting the information to Anthem for setup. But once Anthem has all the details there, they're putting in the time frame of 2 weeks before they send that over to us. Once we get the files from Anthem, it's set up same day. We have the employer set up, the employee is set up at that time as well. So generally, they'll send over the employer files and then within the next couple of days, send over the employee registrations. So as we look through this employer piece right here, the employer, they get the welcome email that then gives them access to view the employee information and make those payroll or employer contributions, review the reports. When they log into the HSA Central Employer Portal, there is information there that allows them to add their employer bank account, which is also on that same site that we referenced earlier, the DocuSign form that they can complete to add their bank account. That's important because that bank account for the employer is where those contributions will be funded from. So if you are looking at using the HSA Central Employer Portal to make your employer contributions or payroll deductions, it's important to make sure that bank account is added. So then flipping down to the employee side, so that enrollment is sent over to us from Anthem for the employee. The employee has that HSA's open and ready to receive deposits if the employee is completing the rest of those things. So they receive a welcome email so long as Anthem is sending us over an email address. They receive that welcome email. They can then log in to establish their username and password. Here's an important piece. They would need to accept the terms and conditions. That account is not fully open and ready for use until they accept those terms and conditions. This kind of comes back to one of the questions earlier about, well, what if we have a Missouri Chamber client who is offering they have HSAs somewhere else? That's fine. Since this is an integrated solution of the health plan itself, think of it like maybe another health benefit that's a part of your insurance that you maybe aren't using. Maybe we aren't all using the counseling services that are a part of a health plan, for example. Similarly to this, they can opt not to use this integrated HSA as a part of their benefits. So they've accepted the terms and conditions. They have full access to the account and funds to use as they wish. On the taking place simultaneously is that they're receiving a welcome packet. This ensures that they're getting the debit card with the welcoming information in the mail, so that they have the details of what to expect, which is important in case we don't have an email address that Anthem has sent over for us. The employee can call the 800 number to activate their debit card and set their PIN, and then they're ready to use that card. So there's those basically three things that the employee would do. They would set up their username and password for online access, accept the terms and conditions, and activate the card. This is the card insert that comes with their HSA card, telling them how they can turn on their account, some other ways that they can optimize that HSA. Maybe they want to go ahead and add a bank account. So if they do have the situation where they went to the chiropractor and didn't have their HSA card, they could then reimburse themselves. An important piece that I really like to mention, especially as these being employee benefits, we don't know from Anthem who someone would like to have as a beneficiary. So that's an important thing for them to add their beneficiary when they're logging in to the HSA for the first time. And so we try to make that prominent within the information under the power your account up section. It also has some of the general Q&A, frequently asked questions on that piece as well. So Dan, I want to pause here since we did have a couple questions around that integration and timing and see if this has addressed those questions or if subsequent questions have come in as a result.
We do have a couple more questions here, Deborah, and I'll get right into those. And if the person who asked that question that you're referencing hasn't received an answer that they think is thorough, they can shoot us another message in the Q&A, and I'll
Perfect.
remind people to please use the Q&A to forward these questions, but we've got a few right now. One from Carter: our employees have HSA accounts set up at other banks, came to the chamber plan having already deployed a high deductible health plan with HSAs. Do we have to switch employees to HSA Central to participate in the chamber plan?
So to answer that question, no, you do not. If they already have that HSA set up elsewhere and want to continue using that, that's perfectly fine. In circling back to kind of my last comment around it being a part of the integrated solution, they get the HSA Central account and card as a part of that integrated solution. Whether they choose to use it is entirely up to them. They can continue to use their other health savings account if they're happy with that. That's perfectly fine. If they do have health savings accounts elsewhere and are now using that HSA Central account, we do have the ability to help them transfer those funds to get everything into one account, which is a definite option as well.
All right. And does HSA Central provide any tools for managing payroll related HSA activities? For example, is there a portal where we can input per employee funding information, or can we make one ACH payment that gets properly divided among the employee accounts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our HSA Central Employer Portal is what would facilitate those contributions. That's the best way to go in to make contributions to your employees. That will also give you full detail reporting from a contribution perspective. So once you've added that bank account from the employer side, you would then have the ability to set up, maybe it's a one-time contribution, or perhaps you're on a biweekly pay cycle that you would like to go ahead and schedule recurring contributions for your employees that would take place each pay cycle. You can go in and edit those at any time. So perhaps Dan was contributing $100 as a payroll deduction, but he now wants to up it to $150. You can go in on that recurring schedule and change it to $150. Or perhaps there's another employee who doesn't work for you any longer and you're not giving them any contributions anymore. You could zero out those future contributions. So that's really the best way to handle those payroll deductions and employer contributions. And you have the ability within the HSA Central Employer Portal to separate those two things out, which is really great as an employer, that especially if you are giving, even a $10 employer contribution to your employees at the end of the year, if you're using the portal to make all those contributions, your reporting is going to show that ABC employer contributed X dollars to their employees as an added employer benefit, an added employee benefit of having that health savings account. So you can separate it out from payroll deductions to employer contributions by using the HSA Central Employer Portal as a means to make those contributions.
All right, a couple more. How do emergency rooms know if the employee has completed their steps to fully open the account?
So the way that they would know is when they try to use that card, it would be declined. So that's the easiest way for them to know. As the employee, if they're trying to access funds within their HSA, the sticker on the front of the card would be a good indicator that they need to call to activate that card. But also, again, from this card insert that you see here, the first thing mentioned is turn your account on. You have to go in and accept the terms and conditions and activate your card.
All right. And if we had set up our high deductible health plan a while back, but want to set the HSA account up now, should we just be heading to Central to get enrollment sent out, or how do we restart that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one I appreciate, Dan. I would say the best thing to do in that is we would need to see where you are in setup right now, because it could be that you're already set up there and just haven't been utilizing the benefit. So we would want, you could shoot us an email and we could take a look to see what next steps are for that. So I want to make sure, Dan, that before we conclude today, that I've provided the proper contact information, so that way you can share that out with information about the webinar.
Fantastic. And there was a correction. I think I made a mistake here. That previous question about the emergency room, strike that.
Okay.
How does the employer know if the employee has completed their steps to fully open the account?
Awesome. Yes, that is much easier to discern than the emergency room knowing whether. So appreciate that clarification. Okay. Also, in the HSA Central Employer Portal, you as an employee or employer can see all your employees. In that, there is reporting that gives you the ability to see, have they accepted the terms and conditions or not? There is an indicator in there that's it's a wire in, yes or no, if they have accepted the terms or not. That automatically produces that report on a monthly basis, but you can run it ad hoc at any time. If you wanted to check and see, hey, I've got these 5 employees, these 2 still haven't accepted their terms and conditions. As an employer, do you want to reach out to them and give them that reminder? Or maybe they're like, oh, I already have another HSA, I don't plan to use that one. You can have that availability to know whether or not they've accepted.
All right, thank you. Another question here. Are there any fees for the HSA?
So the HSA comes with no monthly service fee. That's one of the fees that you would expect from most HSA providers that are giving you kind of all the bells and whistles that we've talked about today. There's no cost for using the card, no bill pay. Any of the fee schedule items that might come across with this would be like an actual transfer fee, like if you were transferring funds from the HSA somewhere else. It would be other things like debit card replacement fees. Maybe you've lost your card and you need a replacement. There would be a small fee for that. As an example, I'm going through this fee schedule in my head here. There is an investment fee of $1 per month. So if you're utilizing investments, you've got the $1 fee there. That's the majority of those, Dan. But consumers, as they are in the consumer portal or on the mobile app, they have their actual fee schedule that they can access at any point in time just to become more familiar. Because a lot of those things, I mean, let's face it, gosh, I hope we don't lose a debit card every day, and we're not transferring funds every day. You can go in there and view the fee schedule at any time to make sure you're familiar with the account.
Great. Remind people that if anybody has a question or comment, please submit them in the Q&A box. Deborah, anything more that you'd like to let us know?
Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything today. I appreciate everyone taking the time to join us to learn a little more about health savings accounts and the great partnership that we have with the Missouri Chamber to offer the integrated solution. So I've got some of the contact information here. Just as the reminder there, the phone number that's listed on the card itself, the the activation line that's on the front sticker of those cards. But then also, again, just if you're wanting to learn more, hsacentral.net is a great resource to go out to take a look at information around calculators, frequently asked questions. And again, that's where you go as an employer to log in and where your employees go to log in as well. Any parting questions that you want to make sure we cover, Dan?
I'm not seeing any come in. I'll just say this and give some people some time if they want to submit any more questions, but this has been a game changer for us. I use it, our employees use the HSA, and it really helps manage your health care costs and just very seamless. Again, this going into our 5th year of having this program, and the numbers are really amazing in the market. To have 95% renewal rate, that tells you that you have something that's working out there, and that growth and retention will help us maintain the stability and longevity of this program. And for the people that were with us from the beginning, the local chambers of commerce through our Missouri Chamber Federation were instrumental in getting this message out to their members. So again, it's really been good. And for a policy standpoint, we've been able to depress the rate increases that we see around the country for small group markets. So we're ecstatic about what we've the partnership with Central Bank has been a great tool to deploy as well. So we appreciate the bank's efforts in this. And Deborah, thanks so much for your time today. We will be assembling these slides and any other pertinent information that we can to send out to the attendees on this list or on that participated today. And we'll definitely make sure they're available on our website, as I'm sure the Central Bank's website will as well. So other than that, Deborah, thanks so much for your time. And again, thanks so much for the partnership. And
Absolutely, my pleasure.
If anybody has any comments or questions, please send them to us or call the Missouri Chamber at 573-634-3511. We'll be happy to try to get you an answer. That being said, I think this will conclude our Zoom today. So thanks to all the people that have been on it. And hopefully this works out and helps you with your benefit package. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.